Hey guys, let's get to work. I used to be a lot more crazy at 7:30 in the morning. I thought, needed to wake people up and get some energy, but it was part of my voice. I was straining my voice. So I've tried to be a little bit more calm, relaxed, also be a better communicator, because sometimes when I get crazy, I talk real fast. So I'm trying to slow it down and convey more information, okay? So, again, this was a little out of sync because the bookstore, the department didn't order the books, there was a miscommunication. So, I gave you the joint lecture Wednesday because having the joint information is important. I bypassed the bones in terms of classification. It's super easy, super simple, but I wanted you to have the important stuff versus 2 days before your test. So real briefly, I'm going to get into the stuff you need to know about the bones. I'm not going to, this is called this is called that. That was in 220. But in terms of classifications, that's important to us as biomechanists and kinesiologists, main classifications of bones, okay? So obviously the ones that we're interested in, mostly the ones involved in motion, and you got a few classifications. The most of them are long bones, a classification where, and there's no rhyme or reason, they just kind of fit them in categories or subcategories. But long bones are very efficient in moving. And you think about a pendulum, if the longer something is, kind of the more area it can cover while staying connected to something else. So long bones, great for movement. We have different movement strategies that all entail long bones. Short bones are great at dissipating force and gliding. Remember we talked about how we can summate little bits? Those little bits are like short bones. A good example of how short bones dissipate force, you think about two places in the body that we have these short bones. We have some short bones in our wrists, we call them carpals, and we have some short bones in our feet, we call them tarsals. You think about jumping off of a one-story building, maybe for a dare, and you had the choice, do you want to land on cement or do you want to land on sand? And of course you're going to take the sand. But if you think about what the sand's actually doing, when you make impact, all those little granules are like little short bones, and they can shift and glide and dissipate on each other. And that's what your tarsals are. Your tarsals shift and glide and dissipate force. If your foot was one solid bone, you would have stress fractures and it would break. And the way I like to look at it is that is the effect of millennia of little mini fractures that dissipate force. Same thing with your hand. When you land on an outstretched hand, you're not supposed to, but those carpal bones kind of help to dissipate some of that force of the chain, okay? So short bones, great at gliding, shifting, dissipation of force. Flat bones are super great at protection. So skull, flat, I know it may not be perfectly flat, but just the concept of a shield that protects things, like in the skull. Even your ribs are classified as flat bones, because you have these slits so that your ribs can expand and contract, but if you really think about it, it's kind of like a shield, to protect internal organs, protection. Another thing good about flat bones is they serve as great surface area for muscles to articulate with, to attach to. So if you have a lot of surface area on these flat bones, you get a lot of muscles that kind of attach here. A lot of muscles here, a lot of muscles here. Another example of a flat bone is your scapula, protection from the back. And a lot of muscles attach on this as well. Pelvis, flat. And then a subclassification of flat that I just want to introduce you to is the patella, sesamoid bones, or a subclassification of flat bones. Because sesamoid bones, although serve as, muscles pass through them and can increase angles of pull, we'll look at that more in biomechanics. But if you fall on your knee or land on your knee or get on your knee, that patella is serving as a protector, like a shield for the anterior part of your knee. You have sesamoid bones in your big toe, man. Dissipation of major force of like a shield. So sesamoid bones are a classification, but it's grouped under flats for mini shields. And then the last one, when we don't really know how to categorize something because it's super weird, we call it irregular. So it's just and irregular bones serve very specialized functions. Basically, we had to create them to serve very specific functions. The first one I'm going to give you are the little bones inside your ear, right? The little ossicles, what we got, malleus, incus, stapes, those little things. Very specific functions, right? To relay sound energy and transfer it to your vestibulocochlear nerve. So that you can interpret sound. Those are very specialized. Remember the hammer, the anvil, right? Very specialized bones. They only serve that one purpose. Other irregular bones, like your jawbone, very specialized. All your vertebrae, very, very specialized, where they got to give a little bit, but they can't give too much because they're protecting all the vessels that run through them. So basically, if it looks weird, that means it's serving a very special purpose. And we call weird irregular. Right? Super simple. Just main class. This is what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to say, what class is this bone? What class is that bone? No, I just want you to understand the concepts of bones that are really efficient at moving us, bones that can kind of work together to dissipate force and to summate motion or to cancel out motion. Bones that are weird that serve specialized purposes, and bones that protect. Okay? All right. We're going to try something different today. Let's see how it goes. But I think this will be a good teaching tool for the take-home message that I'm trying to get you guys to communicate on Wednesday. Remember test on Wednesday, right? I might send out an email if I can remember, just kind of prepping you on some of the things like, Scantron, not the big Scantron, and stuff like that. I would like to play a game called, I ask you some questions and you try to figure out what it would look like. You're going to need a partner, although I'm not, look, if you're like, I like to work alone, that's fine. Your partner could be the voices in your head. That's fine. I don't judge. But here's what we're going to do. Let me preface it. I encourage people on the test to move. Right? Now, do it within reason, but you can move to figure things out, okay? Right? So, to me, that's the best way, not only to make sure you get the right answers, but when you're practicing, to actually do some of the things you see me doing, okay? So, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get into small groups, no more than 3. I understand some of you might like, it'd be like choosing which friend you love more. I get it, man, I get it. I don't want people to unfollow on social media because you had to pick someone. I don't want to be that guy. But you know as well as I know, if your group becomes like a supercontinent, then there's just a lot of apathy, and then you just kind of, right? So this is meant to try to help you see what I'm trying to show you, and also practice the verbiage that I'm trying to show you. Flexed, extended, flexion, extension, to, from, that kind of stuff, right? Another thing also, although I try to check my emails, the new email system, I get lots of spams. And I don't necessarily see all your emails, and I have dyslexia, so trying to filter through it is just tough for me. I miss things more than I wish. So my point is that if you guys are in study groups and you have a question, a specific question, tag me on social media. Like literally, you could put a picture that you found online or a picture of someone you're working with, and say, Dr. Campbell, we just want to make sure that this is an extended position. We just want to make sure that, just tag me, and that way I'll get an alert and I won't miss it, okay? So feel free to do that, and I'm a visual person, so if I could see, in other words, it's tougher for me to read what you're saying because maybe my interpretation of what you're saying isn't exactly what you're saying. But if I could see a picture, then I know we're talking about the same thing and we can make sure you're clarified, okay? So feel free to do that. I don't mind at all. All right, group up. Get up. Let's do it, man. Let's do it. Let's move around. Let's move around. All right, guys. Everybody, for the first question, everybody stand up. Everybody stand up. Mine, I know. I'm hoping this will help, though. Just remember, guys, mind your surroundings, right? Just be wary, okay? Slow and controlled. The first thing I would like for you and or your partner to demonstrate is flexion. Right shoulder flexion to anatomical position. What would that look like if you had to create that specific motion in that specific window that I gave you? Right shoulder flexion to anatomical, not from anatomical, to anatomical. What would that look like? Ready? Go. Discuss. And the reason I want you to discuss it is so that, well, I'm not getting that. Well, what are you getting? And then you can have a chance to kind of figure it out. Right shoulder flexion to anatomical position. Y'all stop talking about the Super Bowl. I'm joking. Oh, we should have done like for bonus points if you get the Super Bowl score right. Maybe next year. We'll do it next year. Okay, guys. I want to do a lot of these, okay? Because this is good practice. Right shoulder flexion to anatomical, to home would look like this. What position would you be in a majority of that motion, up until you get to anatomical? What position? Extended, ED. In an extended position, you flex to go home. Stop it. Okay? Left hip flexion from anatomical position. What you got? Left hip flexion from anatomical position. What would that look like? From flexion, left hip flexion from anatomical position. What would that look like? Okay? All right, here we go. I'm very well trained in this. When I was a child, I was a gymnastics prodigy. Okay, so watch, I can balance on one leg, Maybe I started drinking too early this morning. Left hip flexion from anatomical, here to there. What position am I in? I'm flexed. What would happen if I started going back to anatomical? What motion would I have? What position would I be in? Do this one. Global reference. Can you flex and extend your elbow in the room's frontal plane? What would that be like? Global reference. Flex and extend your elbow in the room's and global reference frontal plane. I have like one spot that it doesn't make that feedback. That's got to be telling me to stay put. Room's frontal plane, guys. Room's frontal plane. Global reference, flex and extend in the frontal plane. All right, rapid fire, here's the answer. Room's frontal plane, right? Now, I could still be looking here. I'd be in the room's frontal because it's not about how I see it. It's about how the room sees it. In other words, regardless of how I'm looking or how you're looking, my elbows would be moving the same globally. Okay? And listen, I apologize. Please feel free, man. Any follow-up questions? Wait, why was the hip thing? Is there any questions about why this would be? Now look, it's not the only way. I mean, I could be here, I could be here, it doesn't matter. But that would be the room's frontal plane with my elbow getting me more into fetal and out of fetal. Any follow-up questions on that? Okay? Show me, I'm trying to keep an inflection extension. See if you can do, this might take some Zen properties. Knee flexion and extension, what would that look like in the room's transverse plane? What would that look like? There we go, we got some karate, we got some karate kid going on. Oh my God, sweep the leg, let's sweep the leg. That's why you have partners, man. Maybe someone a little bit more flexible can do it. Room's transverse plane, flex and extend, then meet in the room's transverse plane. What would it look like? There you go. In Elk, we say, fire! Fire comes up. Okay? So it could look like a lot of different things, but the gist is that you have knee motion like this at the room's transverse plane. So work with me. Room's sagittal, room's frontal, and then for the room's transverse, you have to do a little Michael Jackson. You'd have to like. All right, sorry. I was saving that one move. Room's transverse. Are we cool with global reference? In other words, it doesn't matter. I could be looking here, I could be looking there, I could be looking here. Room's perspective doesn't matter how I'm looking. Okay? Now let's do some locally referenced stuff, right? I want to see, this is going to be tough. It's not that tough. See if you can flex and extend your wrist in the room's frontal, but your sagittal. Room's frontal, your, and remember when I say your, that's your eyes. I want you to see sagittal, and I want the room to see frontal. One at a time. Room sees frontal, you see sagittal. Y'all doing the Choppa Stop. Alright? Now look, here's what's great. It doesn't matter if you're facing here, it doesn't matter if you're facing there, right? It doesn't matter. Room's frontal, my sagittal. I see sagittal plane spin because the axis is my bilateral. That axis is coming through my left and my right. And it's the same answer if I'm facing this one. The axis is still coming through my right and my left. And it doesn't matter if you're here, it doesn't matter here, it doesn't matter. Flexion and extension, room's frontal, my sagittal. Okay? Any follow-up questions on that question? Okay? Absolutely. So the first thing, we don't eat the apple in one bite, little bites, right? So if I say I want room's frontal and your sagittal, I'm not worried about the second part. I want to get the first part right. Room's frontal. That means something like this. Room's frontal plane. We're good with the first one? Okay. Room's frontal, about the room's anterior posterior. That's the front of class, the back of class, anterior posterior. Now the second part is my sagittal. Now if I'm looking at you, I don't see sagittal motion, right? Because sagittal for me is here. So what I have to do is I have to reposition my head so that I see rotation in my sagittal plane. Because the way I see it now, I have an axis coming between my right ear and my left ear, my right shoulder and my left shoulder. So I see sagittal splitting. Here's another way to look at it. We talked about rolls, right? Like a kid could do a front roll, back roll, cartwheel, right? So from here, if I saw spin like this, I would see a front roll and a back roll. You know, I see front and back as I see it. So the class sees this to it, but I see this to me. It's the difference between the references. Global never changes. We all agree this is the front of class, the back of class, so that anterior posterior axis will not change from the room's perspective of motion. Side to side, bilateral, never going to change. Top to bottom polar, never going to change. My reference can change because I can look at the front of class, but to me, facing forward could be here, and facing forward could be there. Okay? So that's the difference. Great question. Thank you for asking that. Any other follow-up questions? Okay? Is this helping? Okay? All right. How about this one? How about this one? I would like for you to simultaneously flex your left shoulder while extending your right shoulder from anatomical position. Left shoulder flexion, right shoulder extension, starting from home. And you know why I wanted to give you this? Because of ESPN, right? I lectured about that, how flexion isn't maybe always what you think it is. Left shoulder flexion, right shoulder extension would look something like this. Right? So what's the new position of my left shoulder? Position. Flexed. What's the new position of my right shoulder? Do you see why I can't say the new positions of my shoulder is flexed and extended? Who's what? Who's what? It's communication of the left one is here and the right one is there. That's why we have to communicate side. Because although they can't do the same thing, they don't have to do the same thing. Okay? All right, how about this one? Let's see, going into fetal, I did wrist. All right. Okay. I'm going to give you a motion to analyze and you try to figure it out. Okay? It's going to be my ankles. It's going to be about my ankles. All right? I start here. I'm up on my toes. I'm going to do it here. I start here. And I do this. I'll move. I'll definitely do. I want to make sure everybody can see. I start, and then I finish. I'll do it in front. Start, finish. Start, finish. Start. This is to make sure you don't confuse your right from your left from my right, my left, right? You're analyzing my motion, my position, my bones, my joints. Start, finish. Guys, on the test, I will never ask you subtleness. What I mean by that is I'm never going to say, what happens here? No way. There's going to be obvious changes, okay? So in other words, don't worry if my left tweaked a little bit. Just, all right, what you got? What happened? What motion was significant? What was obvious? Right side joint motion. Right ankle dorsiflexion. What position did I start in? Didn't I start plantar flexed? And I went to anatomical position. The only way that can happen is if I travel down the dorsiflexion road. Yeah, aha. Who remembers Coming to America? One of my favorite movies of all time. He's like, taste the soup. He's like, I don't want to taste it. He's like, taste the soup. Okay, where's the spoon? Aha! Aha! All right, I'll stop it. Too much pop culture. Okay, what about something like this? Okay, we started off in what I call robot world, where we're like, but remember, in mechanics, engineering, that door will always just move about the wall. In biomechanics, we can move the wall about the door. So, how would you interpret this motion? I feel like I'm about to do like a stunt or something. I start here, and I do this. And again, I don't care about little subtle things. I'm talking about obvious motion. There's one side, one joint, and one motion that had very significant motion in it. That's what I want you to tell me. Left side, left side. Okay, ready? And obviously I was joking earlier about being a gymnast. I can't, y'all know what a sit and reach test is? I don't score. Like I owe inches to get a number. Like my score is like, are you serious? That's my score. Bad. Bad. Okay, you guys got a final answer? Right hip flexion. Now let's talk about illusions. Let's talk about illusions. Too many times our instinct is to go right to what we see moving globally. So your instinct is maybe to say, well, the left hip, stop it. Your instinct may say, well, the left hip had to do something because I saw the left leg move. But that's not the case. That's not necessarily the case. In other words, I can have a halo where I can't move my neck if I try, but yet I can look to the left to look to the right. Okay? I could be in a cast where I couldn't move my hip if I tried and still make my leg move. But that's not necessarily meaning my hip move. Everybody understand the difference? My arm can move, but that doesn't mean my shoulder is moving. My shoulder joint itself. Okay? So the illusion is that there was motion at my left hip when the reality was there was not. The other illusion is it looked like there wasn't motion at my right hip just because it didn't move like we're normally introduced to. But there was motion. Look, I'm going to try this trick, all right? This position, I went from here to there. This is the exact same as this. Hey, right hip, go back home. I have to extend to go back home, right? So guess what I had to do to leave home? I had to flex. Right hip flexion. That's all. Any follow-up questions on why that was right hip flexion? Okay, so if that was right hip flexion, then this would be bilateral hip flexion. And good Lord, I can feel that because the muscles that are pulling me in extension are getting longer and tighter and painful. Bilateral hip flexion, bilateral hip extension. And if you're like, well, what about the trunk? That gets confusing. Guys, you don't get a lot of motion for your trunk. What? This is just trunk, all right? Hey, hands, go down to my feet. You got it, dude. If you feel like a T-Rex trying to grab things, right? This is all hip stuff, man. Okay? Hips, trunk. Hips, trunk. Okay? So, I'm going to ask you guys in your groups. Show me what, if you're balancing on your left leg, do hip extension to anatomical position. What would that look like? Standing on your left leg, I'm not saying you have to start anatomical. You have to figure out how you have to start and how you have to finish. Standing on your left leg, hip extension to anatomical. What would that look like? Hip extension to home. Hip extension to home. Okay guys, if on the test, what if on the test I asked, what position would you have to start in to make that work? You have to start in a flex position. Absolutely. I'm going to start in a flex position. Good. Start in a flex position and then extend to anatomical. Now what would happen if I just kept extending? I wouldn't say extension, hyperextension. That's normal range of motion. So I'd say in terms of communication, where in the window you are is left hip extension to anatomical and then left hip extension from anatomical, absolutely. So like a full range of motion, like if your wrist started in a fully extended position, half of it would be flexion to anatomical and the other half would be flexion from anatomical. It's all good. To and from. That's the whole point of having anatomical position. It's a reference point. Okay? All right? Yes, ma'am. That's okay. Well, let's make sure we're doing it the same way, okay? So we're standing on our left leg, and we're going to start off in a flex position. So like imagine you're like going to pick up your keys from the ground, right? So we start like this, and then we come back. So here's another way to look at it. Here's another way to look at it. This position, from my hips perspective is the exact same as this position from my hips perspective. And I go from here to there, just like I went from here to there. And again, guys, I can't stress this enough. I know y'all are talking about the topic, but I just really want to stress this enough. There's a reason why it's confusing. Because in our lives, that door only moves about the wall. The door only moves about the car. But in biomechanics, we can have two different segments move about each other, and they rotate differently globally. And that's tough for us to, because we're all about cues. Humans pattern recognize. Ring the bell, we salivate. So our cues are, well, if I see this, it must be that. And in biomechanics, it's, how do I open this bottle? Lefty-loosey. But guess what? If the cap was fixed, I could also open the bottle by spinning the bottle to the right. I get the same motion. Open. Close, I could spin the cap one way, but I have to spin the bottle the exact opposite way to get the same change. So that's why this stuff sometimes can be confusing. It's natural to kind of be, whoa, that just doesn't make sense. Because the world we usually live in, the faucet always rotates about the wall, the house. Lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. But in our bodies, man, we can have flexion like this, or we can have flexion like this. We can have flexion like this, or we can have flexion like that. We can have external rotation like this, or we can have external rotation like that. And to our brains, sometimes that could be freaking annoying. Y'all know that movie? Yeah, dodgeball. Yeah, I watched it last night. My goodness. So my point is that that's why I emphasize so much, don't assume, don't assume, don't assume, don't assume. I think it's this, but let me just make sure. position am I in? Because as long as you can see that I'm in a flex position, I'm more in the field like this, right? And this is a flex position. It's the same position whether or not I drew a stick figure like this or whether I drew a stick figure like that. To my hip, it's the same position because my hip doesn't care about the room's perspective. My hip doesn't care about what the room sees. All my hip cares about is what it sees. So to my hip, this position is the exact same as this position. And that's why this motion for my hip is the same as that motion. Good? Good job. Good questions. I'll scale back the pop reference. Okay, rapid fire, guys, rapid fire. Let's try to bring this home. Show me right ankle plantar flexion from anatomical, feet off the ground. Okay? That'd be something like this, right? Sorry, guys. Like pressing on the pedal on your gas, right? Now, show me right ankle plantar flexion if you're standing on your right leg. What would that look like? How would you create right ankle plantar flexion from anatomical position? Okay? Yeah. What if you didn't go up on your toes? What if I said that your foot had to stay flat on the ground? What kind of strategy would you have to do to make plantar flexion happen with your feet staying on the ground? Yeah. There you go. Lean back, right? Yeah. Plantar flexion. Dorsal flexion. Yeah. Now look. On the test, obviously, I'm not going to be like, recreate this, recreate that, but it's good practice. So that way, if you see it on the test, it should actually be easier. Like from there to there, it must be this motion. From here to there, it must be that motion. Okay? All right? What about knee, left knee? How would you demonstrate? This one you may have to sit, that's fine. What if I asked you to flex your right knee at the same time as extending your left knee? What would that look like? Flex your right and extend your left. I guess you could do one at a time, but it would look something like this, right? Flex your right at the same time as you extend your left. Notice, in that one, my left can't be in anatomical position. I'm at the end of the road there, right? I mean, I could extend it from there. That would probably be a bad day for me. So I'm going to take it a little bit down the road first, and then I can bring it back home. Does that make sense? Okay. What about this motion? Interpret this motion. I'm just trying to find different ways to practice this, okay? I start here, and then you observe this. What did you observe? Start position. Finish position. For all of you, who's interested in coaching down the road, at any level of coaching? Guys, motion is faster than the eye sometimes, right? Our eyes can only process so many frames per second. That's why understanding planes and position changes is like basically having a biomechanics lab in your head. If you know where they started and you know where they finished, even though you may not have been able to see it, you know how they had to move to get there. Very useful tool, okay? All right, did I start with my left foot forward or my right foot forward? Left forward, so I did this, okay? What was the significant motion? Well, I had something happen on my left, something happen on my right. If you can't see it, that's fine. But at least you could say, well, what's my starting position? Where am I at? My left hip's flexed and my right hip's extended. And then my right hip's flexed and my left hip extended. So I had to have right hip flexion simultaneously with left hip extension. And it's important to not just say, well, that was flexion and extension. Yeah, you have to be able to communicate which one did what. Fair enough? Okay? All right. Ankles, knees, hips. You go down, for a squat, and you come back up. I'm keeping everything in sagittal. Fetal out of fetal. Sagittal plane, flexion, extension. First test is just practicing these concepts. Start, you go down, you come back up. I want you to tell me motion, ankles, knees, hips. 2 phases. Phase 1 going down, elevator comes down. Phase 2, elevator come up. Ready? Go. Okay, guys? We analyze motion joint by joint, right? So in other words, we're not going to eat the apple in one bite. We're not going to say, whoa, there's so much happening, it's overwhelming. We never want to be in that position as anatomical kinesiologists. We always want to say, yeah, there's a lot going on. And we're going to get to it eventually, but I'm only going to analyze a joint at a time, right? So then it's, well, where do you want to start? Let's start on one end and work our way up. Let's start ankles. So in other words, I know the knees and the hips are moving, and I'm not disrespecting them. I'm just respecting the one we're going to talk about, the one we're going to analyze. Okay? What's happening at my ankles when I lower myself? Practice good verbiage, right? Bilateral, or both sides, because I didn't do it on one or the other. Bilateral, ankle, dorsiflexion. Good job. Okay? That's phase 1. Coming back up, well, if I dorsiflex to go, okay, coming back, I got to move the other way. I go east, I got to come back west. Bilateral ankle joint plantar flexion. Guys, plantar flexion doesn't have to be to go up on your toes. Plantar flexion is a direction of motion. Okay? So dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. I can continue down the road of plantar flexion. There's more road to travel, but this doesn't make it any less plantar. It's the direction of rotation. Okay? What about the knees? Bilateral knee flexion, phase 1. Bilateral knee extension, phase 2. What about my hips? Bilateral hip flexion, bilateral hip extension. Good. It's that easy. While I'm lowering myself down, what position are my ankles? Dorsiflex. What about my knees? Flex. What about my hips? What position am I in at the top? Anatomical. Good. You're always somewhere, right? And if you're an anatomical, you're home. And if you're not an anatomical, you're not home. You're somewhere, either flexed or extended. Abducted, adducted. Protracted, retracted. Home is a position. Yes, ma'am? Sure. So, on the test, I might say you take your foot off of the gas pedal. What motion would you do at your ankle to take your foot off? Well, your ankle doesn't extend. There's 2 different forms of getting into fetal, right? You can get into fetal with your feet off the ground, and you can get into fetal with your feet. It's weird, but if you think about it, the ankle is the only part where the distal part is at a right angle to our proximal part. So we have dorsi and we have plantar. So if you take your foot off the pedal, you're going to have dorsi getting into a ball where the dorsum of the foot gets closer to the anterior of the shin. Okay? Dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. In what we call open chain, that's a fancy way of saying your foot's off the ground. Right ankle plantar, right ankle dorsi. Left ankle plantar, left ankle dorsi. Let me show you bilateral ankle plantar with the feet off the ground. Whee! I would jump higher, but I can't jump higher. So with the feet on the ground, or with, at least with my toes on the ground, I can go bilateral ankle plantar, bilateral ankle dorsi. Dorsi, plantar, extra plantar. Plantars. Yeah. It's just, and again, it may look different, but to the joint, it's like, dude, I'm either doing this or I'm doing this. It's the same. And I can't preference it enough. if the motion is, there's only two things this bottle can do. There's a bone, there's a bone. There's a rigid link, there's a rigid link. The joint is a concept. The interlocking relationship is a concept between these two segments. And if the motion is open, that can happen two different ways. Open or open. And those are in oppositions. Because guys, if they both spun the same way, you'd never get your water. Think about that. If they spun the same way, you wouldn't get the water. They have to move in opposition. And it's the same for our joints. Plantar, plantar. Alright? Is today helpful? Alright guys, y'all have a great weekend, man.